This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 703, The Fast and Furious Art of Sal Buscema. Welcome to Comic Geek Speak. I'm Brian Deemer.
I'm Jamie D.
And I'm Brian Chrisman.
And this episode of Comic Geek Speak is sponsored by Twomorrows Publishing. At Twomorrows.com, they bring you the best in printed fandom. It's it. Don't even look anywhere else. Just ignore all those wannabes out there. They're nothing. Tomorrow's magazines, you got Back Issue Magazine, you got Alter Ego Magazine, books, you got the whole Modern Masters series, you got all the companions that they do. It's all these focus lives of famous, classic creators. If you're a comic fan, you're going to love checking out their books and their magazines. I didn't know about them until we started doing the show. Some of you guys were already reading Alter Ego and Back Issue and stuff. Yeah. I was clueless, didn't even know. Then I started reading Back Issue, and holy smokes, is it fantastic. It's my favorite magazine. You got to check it out. You will not be disappointed. I mean, these Modern Masters books, oh my God, you could drool over them. Some of the original artwork that they have in there that's never been printed anywhere else, sketches and stuff that they found laying around and they scanned in. It's awesome.
Of course, they're cutting edge on fandom with their podcast companion.
That's right.
Tune in podcast. Yeah.
We owe Tomorrow's a great deal for doing the podcast companion book, which is fantastic. Which brings me to the main point of this sponsorship is that right now on Twomorrows.com,
30% off.
30% off all the companions. So the podcast companion, the Batcave companion, what do they got? The Teen Titans companion,
All-Star Comics
All-Star companion,
JLA companion, I believe.
Yep. Krypton companion.
They got some awesome books.
A lot of them for like $11.87.
That's crazy.
Cannot beat those books. For those books, I saw that I went on their website. When did I go? I guess last night while I was just like going around, and I saw the 30% off, and the Blue Beetle companion is $11.87. I've been wanting to buy that for the longest time, and I was like, I had to fight temptation. I may lose if I go back on, but
so please go to Twomorrows.com and check them out. Now, this episode, many of you, specifically Just Bill and Atomic 99 probably too,
exactly,
have been waiting with bated breath for about 4.5 years now for us to do the Sal Buscema episode. And it's we're very pleased to present it to you.
You'll be very pleased.
Yeah. And a big thanks to Tomorrows for helping us do this interview. The Fast and Furious Art of Sal Buscema, the book is coming out. What's the book called?
You're right. That's the title of the book. It comes, I believe, in November 20th.
Right. And that is done by Jim Amash and Eric Nolen-Weathington. And Jim and Sal will be joining us for the first part of this episode. And then after about an hour, we're going to talk to Jim and Eric about the book and how they got it together and all that good stuff. So for the next hour,
I got to tell you, I'm gonna call it right now. Joe Kubert, Gene Colan, Sal Buscema. Those are going to be like the three benchmarks. Yep, and you put Stanley in there too because it's Stanley.
Sure, right.
He's now added to those benchmarks.
It's awesome. So here you go. Here's Sal.
Yes.
Wow. Now, there's a nickname for you.
Well, if he was Scottish, you could call him Kilts.
He's just glad
we could call him trousers too.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, we're going from bad to worse here. What's
so right?
All right. So where do we go from here?
All right. Yeah. Well, then, if you're all ready, we're just going to get started.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
All right. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. And the very first question that I have to ask is, Sal, once and for all, what is the correct pronunciation of your last name?
Oh, my gosh. Let's see. That's probably the 477th time that I've been asked that question. Buscema.
Buscema. All right. See,
now, would you like me to elaborate just a little bit?
Sure thing.
Okay. It's actually Buscema that's the anglicized version, okay? If we wanted to get really ethnic about it, it's actually Buscema. But we thought, since we're Americans, let's anglicize it and make it Buscema. So we go with either one.
All right. Well, now that people can hear it instead of just read it, maybe they'll stick with it, because every time your name comes up, that you hear 17 different pronunciations, and that kind of drives us crazy.
No, tell me about it. I've been living with that for many, many years.
Yeah, I just call him Mr. Jones.
There you go. I answer to pretty much anything.
All right. So
okay, what's next?
So, Mr. Buscema, what was your?
Call me Sal, please.
Okay. Well, I had to just use it in a sentence though, so I could get some practice.
I see. Okay, go ahead.
So, what was your earliest professional work?
My earliest professional work. Oh my gosh, I don't think I can think back that far. It's really difficult to say. I guess it was probably my first job, which I got right out of high school, for a small two-man advertising agency, and I probably did a couple of little black and white drawings for them for something or other. That's the earliest recollection I've got, and that's back in, good gravy, 1953. So it was probably before most of you guys were even thought of.
Yes, I'd say so.
Much less born.
Yes.
Yeah, that's accurate. So, spinning out of that, going to the exact opposite is what does it feel? How does it feel to be kind of an elder statesman of comics?
Wow, and there's a question I've never been asked before. Actually, it feels good. It feels good. I mean, I've been so blessed because I've had such a wonderful career, and to be considered an elder statesman of comics, I think is a badge of honor. Let me tell you a very funny story. When you get to be my age, and you become that elder statesman, it's very difficult to tell anybody else in the business that you were a big fan at one time. However, at a Pittsburgh convention where George Tuska was also one of the guests, and I got to meet George and his lovely wife, and they are absolutely delightful people. I went up to George, introduced myself and my wife, and we talked for a few minutes, and I said, George, I've got to tell you this. This is the first time that I've been able to look somebody in the eye that's been in the business and say, I was a great fan of yours when I was a kid. And he just gave me the biggest smile and laughed out loud. So, anyway, I guess that's what it means to be an elder statesman. George can tell you about that even better than I can.
What were some of the comics or strips that you read as a kid that you loved and that helped you drive you to this profession? Prince Valiant, Rip Kirby by Alex Raymond. I loved Flash Gordon when he did that. The Tarzan strip when it was done by Bern Hogarth, and of course initially it was done by, I believe, Hal Foster. That was probably the earliest thing that he ever did, syndicated in syndication. Believe it or not, one of the ones that I liked a lot because I thought the guy was a terrific draftsman was Alley Oop. And I don't remember the artist's name. Do you guys remember Alley Oop?
V.T. Hamlin.
Okay, see, thank you, Jim. I'm glad you're here to fill in the blanks. And of course, yeah, I love the funny ones. One of my favorites was Blondie, which was really about Dagwood Bumstead. That was Chip. What's his name? Help me, Jim. Chick Young, right? Chick Young. Absolutely brilliant comic strip. Lasted for, good grief, 50, 60 years? I think it's still around. So,
it's still over 2,000 newspapers.
Yep.
Isn't that amazing? Just an amazing phenomenon. One of my all-time favorite strips. I don't know. I can't think back any. That's about it.
Do you mind if I ask Sal a question here?
Sure, go right ahead.
Sal, by the way, Alex Raymond's brother Jim ghosted Blondie for many years. You might be interested to know that.
Did he really?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
In fact, Alexander Blondin Dagwood's son was named after Alex Raymond.
Is that right?
But what I wanted to ask you about was when you were looking at Hogarth's Tarzan. You know, because I know that you were interested in fine arts and you were looking at Michelangelo and all that. Were you know, how much were you studying the Hogarth's anatomical drawings? Because he spent more time detailing, you know, human anatomy than, say, Hal Foster or Alex Raymond.
I guess I'm not sure. I agree with that 100%. Okay. His figures anatomically may have been more pronounced and more defined. Simply, I got the feeling that he enjoyed that, doing that kind of thing. I mean, all you have to do is look at the books that he wrote on anatomy, and I think that those books were particularly applicable to comic book illustration, superhero illustration, because of the exaggeration and so on. But anatomically, I mean, Alex Raymond and Hal Foster were just marvelous draftsmen. I just think that their figures are maybe just a little bit more subtle and a little bit less, for lack of a better term, comic bookish than Bern Hogarth.
Right. No, I agree with you. It's just that it was.
Well, of course you do. You better agree with me. I'm only kidding. I know. I thought
they were better drafted than Hogarth, but I thought Hogarth.
Oh, no question about it. No question that they were better. Yeah, and I certainly don't think they knew any less about anatomy than Bern Hogarth did.
Oh, I think they knew more, but Hogarth, it was more obvious with Hogarth because, you know, he stripped the fat off the bodies and just gave you the musculature.
Right. I think you're saying this pretty much the same thing. You may have expressed it better than I did, Jim, but they were definitely better draftsmen than Hogarth, no question about it.
Right. I was just wondering, though, because it was more obvious where Hogarth's interest was on delineating human form, if perhaps, you know, that might have struck a different kind of chord with you in terms of, you know, you thinking about anatomy. That was why I had asked.
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, way back then, I probably was not that familiar with Bern Hogarth's work.
Okay.
I only became familiar with it later on when he produced his anatomy books.
Okay. I'm sorry, Brian. I didn't mean to hijack you.
No, not at all. Jim, I actually have
He does it all the time, Brian.
It's true.
No, I'm kidding.
It's true.
Jim, I actually have a question for you, Jim.
Sure.
So you wrote a book on Sal. So at what point did you realize? I'm assuming that you're a fan. And at what point? Was there a certain comic that you said you read and you went, "I like this guy. I'm a fan"?
Well, the very first one I saw of Sal's was he did the Avengers. That was the first thing of Sal that I had seen. And
probably the worst book I ever did.
I don't think it's as bad as you do, Sal, in all honesty. But, you know, I went, hey, he's got to be related to this John Buscema guy. That's how I pronounced it back then, before I knew any better. And I was looking, and I was comparing, and I said, hey, this guy, this Buscema is pretty good, too. So I have to say that I like Sal's work from the beginning, frankly. I think Sal, maybe by virtue of being older than the average comic book artist who burst upon the scene, I think that Sal, because of his vast background in the arts, came out a lot more polished than newcomers generally do. I think that gave Sal a leg up. Certainly made him superior to most people who begin, and I think that Sal's innate thoughts and abilities were obvious from the start. I mean, he got better, of course, but I'm just saying from the start there was something tangible there that was bound, you know, to work as good comic books. So I liked his work from the beginning.
Thank you, Jim. You said that just the way I told you to.
I want $5, you promised.
Did I say that much? Good grief.
You can.
I appreciate that, Jim. It's very, very, very kind of you to say that.
It's also the truth as I see it, Sal. So you're welcome. Go ahead, Brian.
So, Jim, to kind of follow up on that, in the process of working on this book with Sal, is there anything you learned about him that you didn't know prior to doing the book?
Well,
You learned what a grouch I was.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't think he was a grouch. I will say this about Sal. I've interviewed at least a couple hundred people now between any books I've done or Alter Ego or whatever. And I'll say one of the things that I knew this about Sal already because I met Sal when he, a few years ago when he came to the Charlotte, Heroes Con in North Carolina. And Sal has a quality as far as his personality is concerned that I admire very much, which is you ask Sal a question, he gives you an honest answer, and there's no BS. And I like that a lot because sometimes people don't want to answer questions and they fudge, but Sal didn't do that. I think that makes a good interview. When a guy's got a good memory and he's willing to share it, and he's willing to give you straight talk, you get a good interview 99.9% of the time. As far as what I learned more. What I learned about Sal, I learned a little bit more about his, personal life. I learned a little more about his pre-comic book days, which I was interested in, and I felt like that needed and deserved some detailing. And outside of that, a lot of the stuff I think I already knew. I might not have known certain the extent of certain details, but I certainly knew his career very well because I bought darn near every book that Sal ever drew. So
gosh.
I had that.
So you were the one.
Yes, I was the one. the one of many thousands, probably millions. But I think the best thing about the book itself, this is my feeling, is I wanted to present, because Sal's given interviews before, but I want to do more. I want to do something more extensive so people would understand exactly why Sal Buscema was great, why Sal Buscema matters, why Sal Buscema is popular. And I think people deserve to get his fans deserve to get a good look at this guy who's entertained them for what? At least two generations. Maybe we're starting on a third generation now. And I think that Sal...
Well, it's 41 years to be exact.
Yeah, Sal deserved that, and I wanted the chance to be the one who did it, and, thankfully it's me, because I was always a fan of Sal's work.
Excellent.
I'm going to have to hire this guy as my PR man.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, I'm telling you. Thank you, Jim. You're very kind.
You're very welcome. So that's but there's several little things. I think I learned more about Sal on a personal level, like when we talked baseball and things like that, And
I'm an old Dodger fan.
Right.
Brooklyn Dodgers, that is.
Of course. They haven't moved, according to Sal.
No. They'll always be in Brooklyn.
Right. So those are the sort of things I think that I would say just to answer your question. And I wanted to share what I knew with other people. I think that Sal's career deserves a real retrospective, a real look, and I wanted to put a little bit of the personal aspect of him in there because I think that Sal, people want to know about this man, and I don't know if you know this or not, but John Morrow, who's the publisher of this book, told me that he had more requests for a book on Sal Buscema than any other artist. And I think that speaks volumes about Sal's, footing in comic book history, and certainly Marvel comic book history.
Jim, I got to tell you, that just absolutely blows me away because I would never in a million years have guessed that because I've never considered myself a fan favorite. And to hear that, and you did mention this to me one time before when we talked on the phone, and I'm just amazed. I'm truly amazed and very, very humbled by it.
Well, you got to remember, you did over 100 issues of Spider-Man. You did 100 issues of the Hulk. You did lots of Defenders, lots of Avengers, lots of popular books. You worked on the Silver Surfer. You did a great run with Steve Englehart on Captain America. I think an important run. It was some of my favorite, Captain Americas. And I think that you could only expect. I mean, you had to be selling the books. You had to be liked and popular. You can't last 100 issues on the Hulk and not be good and not be popular.
If you say so, my friend.
That's just my viewpoint on it.
Well, so. I'll definitely back him up on that because I'm from the I'm in my 40s and I'm from the era of 70s and 80s work, and when I think of the Hulk, Sal, you are the person I think of as far as the artist goes, and the Defenders, and just you had that look along with many others, but it was just one of those that I knew when I picked up a Hulk book over a certain amount of time that was going to be there. So you are definitely, as far as I'm concerned, one of the more important artists from the Marvel in the 70s and 80s.
Well, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate that.
That's okay.
Kind. You're very kind too. You and Jim are being very kind to me today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I feel very humbled by it.
No, that's okay. This was Jamie. I forgot to say who it was before I said it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Jamie.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't confuse me with this old guy over here.
Yeah,
I'm not too good at voice recognition. So.
That's okay. Like I said, I forgot to say it was me before I started. The one question I have for you, Sal, is you said...
This is Jamie now.
Yes, this is Jamie again.
Okay, go ahead.
You had said that when Jim had talked about your Avengers work, you said you didn't like it all. That wasn't your best. What would you looking back on your career, what would you consider your best work? What were you most proud of?
I think probably because it's my favorite character of all time is the work that I did on the Hulk. When I was penciling and inking it for a period of time, when I worked with, I guess it was a period of time with Bill Mantlo. I really think that's some of my best work. Also, later on with the Spider-Man series, Spectacular Spider-Man, some of the work that I did with Mark DeMatteis, who wrote some wonderful stories. I don't want people to get mad at me. I have a terrible memory for names. Tom DeFalco, obviously, I think he and I had a good run on the book. And a period of time when I was, I guess I could call it my Bill Sienkiewicz period, when I was learning a tremendous amount and I believe growing as a comic book illustrator, just from seeing some of the wonderful stuff that Bill did, who I think is just an extraordinary talent. And I was doing a lot of work instead of inking with a brush, I was inking with a pen, croak wheel pen to be specific. And for the simple reason that I couldn't find any good brushes anymore. Winsor Newton had gone to pot, so I said, "The heck with it, I'll go to pen." And it was a lot of fun. It was a real departure for me, and some of those books I think were some of the best that I did. So. But I've never been a big fan of my work. I'm never satisfied with what I do. Because I'm always very critical. I'm my own worst critic.
So in other words, you're just a typical artist.
Yeah. But believe me, I've known a lot of artists. And, but as Jim mentioned, before I got into comic books, I was in advertising and graphics, and worked for art studios and advertising agencies. Mm-hmm. And I have met some artists who thought that they were phenomenal, and I could never understand that because I've always had the belief that if you think that you have arrived and that you can't grow anymore, then you've given yourself a death sentence, artistically speaking. Sure. Because as an artist, you have to continue to grow for as long as you work. And if you're not growing, the only alternative is death, artistic death. So, but I have met individuals like that. I think most artists feel that they're not as good as they can be, and that's a very, very healthy attitude.
Sure. No, I can understand that, but in all of our interviews we've done, and people, your peers, people like Gene Colan and some others, every time we talk about their artwork and how much we love it, they always say, "Oh, it's not that guy wasn't satisfied with that," and I look at it as somebody who can barely draw a stick figure, and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's the most amazing thing ever."
Yeah, It's as I said. I think the best thing you can say for it is for an artist, for a professional, it's a very healthy attitude, because that means that you're just going to continue to strive for improvement, to learn more, and it's a never-ending learning process. Once you stop learning, that's the end of it. So it's a good attitude, and anybody that has that attitude, I think, is definitely on the right track.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sure.
Every bit of it. Not only that, Sal, because he also spent a significant part of his career inking other people, showed that he's actually quite adaptable to inking anybody, and not all inkers can ink just about everybody. And Sal proved his adaptability in that way too, and I would imagine Sal can vouch for this, that sometimes inking other people, would inform his own work when it came to, for him to do his own penciling. Would you agree with that, Sal?
Yeah, I think so. That's part of the learning process when you ink over other people and you're seeing how they're doing things. One of the things that I mentioned Bill Sienkiewicz, my brother. My gosh, I guess pretty much any of the biggies that I've been. John Romita Sr. Never had the opportunity to ink John Romita Jr., who I think is just phenomenal. But anytime you're inking people like this, you're definitely learning. It's always a learning process, and here again, that's another thing that helps you to grow. However, I have to take exception with one thing that you say, Jim.
Okay.
A good inker, and I've always felt this way, a good inker can ink anybody. It's just, and I think you'll agree with me that most good inkers, if not all, are also good draftsmen. They can draw to a certain extent, and maybe they may not be the kind of draftsman that a Jack Kirby or a John Buscema or a Joe Kubert. They may not be that good, but they do have drawing ability. I don't consider myself as good a draftsman as some of these guys, but I can draw, and that's one of the reasons why I can ink. Right. And I really feel that I can ink anybody, and I pretty much think anybody. I've always had a problem with the expression, "Gee, this is a good marriage" between the inker and the penciler. You get a guy like Joe Sinnott, who was another one of my favorites. Jim, help me out here. He also inked Kirby.
Joe inked Kirby. He inked your brother. He inked you. He inked
something's breaking up here. How you doing?
I'm fine. Nice to see you.
Anyway, what I was saying before is that just to bring it to a conclusion is that a good inker can ink anybody. I've always felt that way. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point.
Well, the reason why I made a distinction, I agree with everything that Sal had said. The reason why I made a distinction is because some inkers, frankly, are not that good a draftsman. Sal was a good draftsman. Sal had an open mind. Some inkers don't have an open mind when it comes to interpretation, and the difference I felt that Sal had an open mind, and that's why he understood different styles and was able to service the needs of whoever the penciler was. Unfortunately, Sal didn't always get that back when he was a penciler, and he had some inkers who really didn't treat Sal's pencils, in that manner. And I guess maybe I was thinking of that a little bit too,
Well, that could be. What you say is true, but keep in mind too that for a long period of time, what I was doing was breakdowns.
Right.
And a lot of times, when an inker gets breakdowns, even though mine were fairly tight, you're going to see a lot more of the inker than you would of the penciler. So, but basically speaking, my philosophy, my approach to inking has always been to be faithful to the penciler, especially when you're dealing with guys like, John Romita or John Buscema or any of the really good Gene Colan, unless you were told specifically this, we don't care for what he did here. Can you do something with it, or tweak it, or whatever? Only when the editor, the client said, can you change it? Can you redo this? That's when when I would depart from that approach. But otherwise, I want inkers to ink me the way I inked other guys. I was always faithful to the penciler and what he did, and a lot of times that happened with me with my penciling. A lot of times it didn't. So Jim is correct in that respect.
I'd like to add one thing to this, too. Even when Sal was just doing breakdowns, and sometimes he had very heavy-handed finishers, no matter what they did to Sal's pencils, they still couldn't kill his storytelling. And I think that's a very important point to keep in mind, that Sal was telling stories, too. He may not have been telling them quite in the Will Eisner mode, but who says he has to? Sal was working in the Marvel mode that served everybody well, from readers to publishers and editors to Sal himself. And I think that the fact that these finishers, when he had good ones or when he had bad ones, they couldn't kill the essence of what Sal put on a page.
Thank you again, Jim.
It's the truth.
Appreciate it.
Hey, Sal. This is the other Briner, Pants, if you will.
Hey, Pants, how are you?
Oh, very well. I've been
I love that. That's fantastic. Go ahead. Don't let me interrupt you.
Okay. The question I'm thinking of, I'm looking at a listing of your work in chronological order during the 70s, and it looks like you're working on sometimes 2, 3, and 4 books a month. Now, it doesn't tell me whether you're writing or penciling or inking, but what was your workload like, and how did you schedule your workload for the week?
I had a huge workload back then. I was one of the guys that Marvel had that was dependable. I've always tried to be very professional, and one of the things about being a professional is to make sure that you deliver work on time, because we have schedules that we have to adhere to. And anytime Marvel got into trouble with a book, if it was late, if the artist on that book was not delivering the pages when they needed to be delivered, I was very, very fortunate in this respect that they would come to me and say, Sal, can you do a fill-in? Can you do this? And there were times when I was literally working on 4 or 5 books a month, which is one of the reasons why I did go to breakdowns, because when you're handling a load like that, you can't, unless you want to work 18, 20 hours a day, and I don't particularly want to do that, you can't do finished pencils. So, but yeah, I did have a tremendous workload, and I was also blessed with a certain amount of speed, so that all combined to make me somewhat valuable to Marvel, and it served me very well. I hope it served them very well too, because I was very grateful to be able to get that kind of a workload. When you're in demand, it's a wonderful thing, especially in this business.
That's where I guess we get the title of the book, Comics Fast and Furious Artist.
Yeah, well, that wasn't my idea, so I guess I was fast and furious, but it was out of necessity. So.
You were. Well, John Morrow was the one who came up with the title, and I think it's apt because not only was but why was Sal fast is a question, and of course he was able to internalize the knowledge he had, and he was able to put it on paper. Some artists are slow because they're afraid of a blank page. That's something Jack Kirby used to say, don't ever be afraid of a blank page. And Sal was never afraid of a blank page, and that might not sound like much, but to some people, they find it a daunting or a terrifying, thought to begin. Sal didn't have that problem because he was a thorough professional and he knew what he was doing, and he had all the ability at his command and within easy reach of actually making those lines on paper. That's why I think the title fit him. But John Morrow came up with the title, Sal.
Yeah, I assumed as much, Jim. There's another aspect to this too. It's not just a matter of speed and so on. I've also heard stories about guys who just didn't work.
Right.
And consequently, they would, turn in 3 or 4 pages a week, or 3 or 4 pages in 2 weeks. I happen to be, and I think I have to thank my years in advertising and in the advertising art industry, that this really helped me, because we got ridiculous deadlines. I mean, we'd be walking out of a studio getting ready to go home, and a client would call with a job, and you'd have to stay and work through the night to get the job done by the next day. So when I got into comics and the deadlines were, Sal, we need this by the end of the month, it was almost laughable to me, because that was a piece of cake. So it's a question of discipline. It's a question of being professional. And I'm a fairly disciplined person for several reasons, because I have a family. My family is the most important thing to me in my life, and I wanted to make sure that I spent as much time with my family as I possibly could. So I tried to work pretty much a 9-to-5 day. It didn't always work out that way, but I always tried for that. And that's one of the reasons. When I worked. I produced as much as I possibly could within that period of time. And there have been a lot of stories, and I'm sure you've heard this too, Jim, that there were a lot of guys, extremely talented, gifted people, who kind of didn't have that discipline. And this is one of that. I think it's something that may be peculiar to the comic book industry too. So this is one of the reasons why I was so fortunate to get all this work, because other guys weren't doing what they were supposed to do, and it really benefited me. But that wasn't the only reason, obviously. But anyway, I'm just glad it worked out that way.
Well, I'd like to say something. Amplification. I mean, sort of talk.
Well, of course you would, Jim. You always have something to say. My gosh.
I always do.
Go ahead.
I don't know, some of your listeners might not know this, but I've been inking professionally for over 17 years. A lot of, and I've almost never been out of work, and one of the reasons I think is partially my speed, because I have the discipline, like Sal, to sit there and I know how to stay in my chair and do the work and not be distracted by other things, and that takes a lot of discipline. It's the only way you can meet production in the business. Some people don't have that discipline. Some people don't have the desire, and I've made a career at times. When the years I was at Marvel, they'd call me up because they knew that I would stay up over the weekend and ink half a book or more, and that would happen to Sal too. Sal, can you pencil a book in 3 days? So Sal would do that. Sal, can you ink this book in 5 days? Sal would do that. I've experienced that myself. A lot of other people have, but some people can fit the demands of the job it takes to be a comic book artist, and some don't. And the ones who do fit it tend to have the longer careers, and I think that helps in part explain Sal's longevity. He was dependable. He gave you quality, and both are of equal importance.
Incidentally, just as an aside, the other inker I was trying to think of was Frank Giacoia, who I think was one of the most fantastic inkers of all time. And this is a guy that could draw. I had the pleasure of inking a few pages that he had penciled. It was just, I think it was just 2 or 3 pages that they were going to produce at the beginning of a particular book that Frank penciled, and I believe the character was the Panther, and
yes,
the Black Panther, yeah, and. When I saw the pages, I was very impressed, because this was a guy that could draw, and that's, again, one of the reasons why he was such a terrific inker, and for my money, one of the best 3 or 4 best inkers in the business.
The story you're remembering is an Avengers story, actually, that starred the Black Panther.
My gosh, that's amazing, Jim.
And
I was happy that I remembered it was the Black Panther. I had no idea what book it was.
Right.
Anyway, that's fantastic. What a memory.
87 or 88 or something. I can't believe I remember this either, but I do. And in fact, you mentioning Frank Giacoia brings up a point. Frank Giacoia was not disciplined. He was one of the greatest inkers in comics, but he was not disciplined. He frequently had to have people like Joe Giella and Mike Esposito help finish his work.
Is that right?
Yeah, if a favorite movie came on, if he'd seen Gunga Din 100 times, he had to see it 101 times. and then he'd miss his deadlines.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why Frank never had super long runs on books because of his discipline problem, but he was every bit as good as Sal said. But this shows you a difference between two men and the divergence in their careers because of their attitude and their discipline.
Yeah.
Sal, this is
I never knew that.
Sal, this is Jamie again.
Go ahead, Jamie.
You kept saying that you were in the advertising business. What made you decide to leave the advertising business, which I would think would have been more lucrative at that time, to go into the comic book business?
It afforded me a certain amount of independence. Advertising, graphics, when you're working for an art studio, it's very, very demanding. If you're going to earn a good living in that business, you have got to be able to work whenever you're asked to work, and that sometimes, as I mentioned before, the deadlines were ridiculous, and you really had a situation where that kind of a working schedule interfered with your family life. When the opportunity came along to do comics, and this was back in the, I guess maybe the late 60s. I guess I started with Marvel in 68. That just, first of all, I liked him. I mean, John was a comic book artist, and I had, worked with him briefly, and I always had this desire to do them. Of course, when I was ready to get into the business was pretty much dead. So when the opportunity arrived again, I just jumped at the chance, and luckily, as they say, the rest is history. So that's the primary reason. It was a lot more relaxing for me. It was obviously I could work at home, and that was a boon in itself because I had three sons, and I saw them grow up. I didn't have to leave the house every day. And believe me, when I saw I lived in a very rural area. We had a very lovely home on 2 acres of land, and the neighbors on a snowy day, I'd see them slipping and sliding up and down the road, and I had to walk about 50 feet from my kitchen into my studio, and that's when I realized, man, do you have it made? It's just fantastic. So that's that story.
So, Sal, this is Brian. I have a question for you.
Sure, go ahead, Brian.
The major part of Marvel and what made it so successful, but certainly is something that's very memorable about Marvel, is that they had the Marvel style. The Marvel style of doing comics, the Marvel style of drawing comics. In your experience, do you think that was a good thing? Was it a bad thing? What were the ups? What were the downs?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That was Stan's brainstorm. He felt, justifiably, I thought, that the illustrators, the artists, could tell stories pictorially a lot better than the writers could. Writers are great putting words down on paper and painting pictures with those words, but comics is such a different medium that he felt when you have talents like Jack Kirby and John Buscema and Gene Colan and John Romita, let these guys tell the stories pictorially. Give them an outline, give them a plot, but give them the freedom to tell the story the way they want to tell the story. And I think the product speaks for itself. To me, the greatest years, the greatest books that Marvel ever produced were done with that approach. I understand that now they're doing it more in the DC style. I mean, incidentally, as an aside, I think this is also one of the reasons why Marvel became the #1 comic book company in the world, pretty much 2-to-1 in comparison to DC, which still used the full scripted approach. To me, there's just no comparison, and I am absolutely mystified as to why they went back to that full script method of doing the comics. I don't understand it, because the comics that were produced the other way, to me, there is no comparison. They're far superior.
That's interesting to hear, because obviously probably a lot of writers would say, "Hey, pal, you're stepping on my territory," but if it
I got to call them the way I see them.
That's right. You can take the artist out of Brooklyn, but
they may feel that way, but I mean, I don't think there's anybody in the business that wrote a comic book better than Stan Lee. And this is a man that was doing 2 comic books a week, writing 2 comics a week, and that he'd call. Just as an aside, unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to work with Stan that much, but of course John did, and he and I would talk about it a lot, and Stan would call him up and he'd give him a plot over the phone, and it was fairly loose, and John could just run with the thing, as did the other guys that worked up at Marvel. So I don't know. To me, the product speaks for itself. I think the comics that are being done today are just, frankly, they pale in comparison. I just don't think they're as good. I think they're not as exciting. I don't know. It's just maybe I'm partial to that era, but that's the way I feel, and probably I will take that to my grave.
Did you ever encounter a day or something when you were given this kind of plot outline and you sat down to draw a page and went, I'm not really sure what I want to put here?
Yeah, I guess so. But when you get to a point, and I guess I have to say this, that the first 4 or 5 years doing comic books for me were very difficult. I struggled, and I'm being very candid about that. Every page I turned out, I sweated over. But then I don't know what happened. At the end of that 4 or 5 year period, it's kind of like things all came together. And then all of a sudden, it got a lot easier for me. Maybe I could say that at that point, I really learned how to do comic books, how to tell a comic book story. And it became very easy. That's when I became very fast. And that's when Marvel was asking me to do 78 books a week. And obviously, that's an exaggeration, gentlemen. I don't want you to get upset by that. But anyway, at that point, I just, I guess I can say, yeah, that probably happened upon occasion, but for the most part, when I read a plot, I would sit and think. This is my system. This is the way I worked. I would sit and think about a page sometimes for 45 minutes, just thinking about the content of that particular page. And then I would touch pencil to paper, and what I worked out in my brain seemed to transfer pretty well to the page. So I really, in all honesty, I really never had a terribly difficult time once I saw the blank page, and I pretty much knew what I wanted to do with it.
Cool.
Sal,
I'm sorry to be ending so abruptly. There's this pregnant pauses here.
No. We kind of look at one another just to see who has the next question.
Okay. I'm just kidding, guys. Go ahead.
It's Jamie again. Question: You were part of what a lot of people consider the Marvel bullpen. And at the time, Stan had all of his fun names, Jazzy, Johnny Romita, and
you were the one he picked for me.
That was my question, because I had heard John Romita talk, and he said that his mother hated Jazzy Johnny. When she found out, she called up Stan and was like, "My son is not Jazzy." And I just want to know what you.
Is that right? right. I never knew that.
Yep. So I just want to know what you thought of our pal Sal.
I thought Stan probably thought about that for maybe 1.3 seconds and then put it down on paper, and it sort of stuck. So I wasn't too crazy about it, but I figured, what the heck, it's okay.
It was fun.
Just so long as they send the paycheck sometime.
That's right.
They can call me whatever they want.
Any, Sal, this is Brian again, any interesting or amusing anecdotes that perhaps didn't make it into the book that you might want to share with us?
Oh, my gosh. I think what's in the book is probably more than people want to know. So
That's fair enough.
Jim, did we touch upon the interview that I had with Stan? I can't remember. I just, to be very honest, I just went through the script. The edited pages, and I've done a little bit of editing of my own, Jim, in case you didn't know that. But nothing major, believe me, nothing major. One of my favorite anecdotes, and I told this story at a convention that was honoring Stan Lee. It was in Chicago, I believe, back in the 90s. I don't remember exactly what year, but it was the time when he interviewed me back in 1968. I can't remember exactly what month, but it was when I first started with Marvel. And I got to meet the great man, and I was very impressed with him. He's a very dynamic guy, obviously. And he, just to get across his idea of how he wanted comic books done, I literally began leaping around the room. He jumped up on his chair. He jumped on his desk. I thought he was going to leap out the window and take me with him. And it was amazing. And as I told the audience, this is kind of a roast that we did of Stan that particular night in Chicago. I said, the guy absolutely terrified me. I was ready to run out of the room, which wasn't really true, obviously, but I was very amused and very impressed with his enthusiasm. You could just tell that he just loved this work that he was doing. He loved his job, and he wanted everybody else to love it, and it was infectious. And I really got caught up in it. I really did. It was a fantastic interview, and I remember it very clearly to this day, and I probably will to my dying day.
We've heard numerous stories now from different creators about some of the eccentricities or whatever you want to call it of Stan, and it really helps to paint an interesting and fun picture of the man that we all kind of hold so dear to us as Marvel fans.
Absolutely. When they say he's a legend in his time, to me that's not an exaggeration. He is a very dynamic individual. I think it's remarkable that I think Stan, if I guess correctly, he should probably be in his 85th year.
Yeah, I think so.
And he seems 15 years younger than he is, and he's just a remarkable guy. And he's definitely left his mark. There's no question about it. And it will go on for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, Gene Colan told us that when he was interviewing there, that Stan was wearing a beanie with one of the propellers on top.
You're kidding.
No.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised. No, Stan, I'm not surprised to hear that. He didn't wear it when I was there, because then I really would have been scared.
Sal, it's Jamie again.
Hey, Jamie.
You most recently have worked on Amazing Spider-Girl, and that has come to an end. If the right project came along, would you continue working?
I will continue working as long as they want me, Jamie. I feel so blessed in that respect. A lot of guys in this business, whether it's comic books or other areas of commercial art, reach a point where their work is no longer in demand. And obviously, I don't want, at my age, I don't want to work the way I did 10, 15 years ago. But to be able to work is wonderful. I'm one of those, and I mentioned this in the book, if you recall, Jim. I'm one of those weird people that believes that work is good for you. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very important part of your life, and if that is taken away from you, there's a real hole there. So as long as they want me to work, I am more than, and I am physically able to, and so far so good, I will be more than happy to accommodate them.
I think it speaks well for the fact that here's Sal, been in the business 41 years. He's still in demand. I mean, how many people can really say that? You know, only a handful have the kind of career and longevity that Sal has had, and I think that speaks volumes about his work and frankly about him as a person too. You just don't see careers like this very often. A steady career without interruption, without a break. That's pretty remarkable, I think.
It sure is. Now, Sal, I have one last question for you, and that is, do you pay attention at all to any of what's going on in current comics, and is there any, I don't say artist from the last 10 years that you really think is pretty awesome and you admire their work?
You know, I've got to be very honest with you. Is it Jamie?
This is Brian. I'm sorry.
Brian, excuse me. I'm sorry, guys. Brian, I to be very, very candid, I was in Borders bookstore just, I don't know, maybe about a week or a week and a half ago. I was buying a book. I wanted to buy a novel, some junk novel that I could just read casually. And I always walk over to the comic book carousel. And I thumbed through some of the Spider-Man books and a couple of the other things, and honestly, I am not terribly impressed with what I see. Maybe it's because my impression of what comics should be has become so rigid. See, I'm one of those strange people that thinks that comic books should be a medium for kids. I think it's okay to do comic books for adults, but it is the kids that made the industry what it finally became. It is the kids that go to see the movies now primarily. I know they still have a huge huge adult audience, but comic books always, maybe it's because I was a kid when I started reading comic books. Comic books always they were a medium for children. Like Stan said, they were modern-day fairy tales. They're no longer modern-day fairy tales. Now they're very dark. They're very foreboding. They're very cynical. It's just not my cup of tea. To me, it's almost like watching a movie that's a real downer. I saw one recently, and I won't mention the name of it. It's not that important, but it was a real downer. And my wife and I watched it and said, "My gosh, there was really nothing entertaining about that." And that's the way I feel about comic books. It's an entertainment medium. When you look at some of the books that Jack Kirby and Stan Lee did together, some of the Fantastic Four stories they did, they were just phenomenal. They were just so wonderfully entertaining, and you could give them to a 9 or 10-year-old kid and say, "Here, have fun for 30 minutes," and the kid would have a great time with it, and then he'd put it away and maybe take it out a month later and read it over again, or maybe go out and buy another one. To me, that doesn't exist anymore, and I think that's one of the reasons why comic book industry is about 20% of what it used to be. They don't mass market anymore. They don't try to appeal to kids, and it's to me, it's a sad state of affairs. It really is. I'm sorry I went on so long, but I feel very, very passionately about that. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. I can't think of a better way to end an interview than a heartfelt plea to the industry to get their act together.
Yeah. Hey, beautifully put. Beautifully put.
Yeah, I just want to, this is Jamie again, I just want to add a hallelujah to that, because I've been expounding that view for quite a while, and I get shouted down by some of the younger guys, but I totally agree with you.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I think we're lost voices in the wind somewhere.
Yeah.
So maybe it'll happen someday. I certainly hope so. It's to me, it's just kind of. I don't know exactly how to put it. It's such a totally American product that has been lost. It's a craft that is being lost. So I don't know. What more can we say about it? I'm glad you agree with me. This has been a blast, guys. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us.
It was my pleasure, believe me.
And our listeners,
I appreciate it too.
Our listeners have been asking for it for a long time, so we're very happy to finally bring them the great Sal.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Please, there's nothing great about me, but thank you. I hope I didn't disappoint.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Well, thanks so much, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you so much. My wife and I are going to go out and have dinner now.
Wonderful.
But first I have to deliver a job to FedEx to get it to Marvel by tomorrow morning.
All right.
So that never ends. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care, Jim.
Bye-bye.
You too, Sal. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey guys! Before we get going too far, happy 700.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Yes.
That many, huh?
Yeah, and that's just our numbered ones. We actually counted, and we have, 860 something?
I think sometime in there, yeah.
Oh, great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we're a little nuts.
Just a little, yeah.
Dedicated people generally are.
Yeah.
It's our work ethic. We got it from Sal.
That's right.
All right, well then, I guess we'll continue here.
Okay.
So, this book, well, how did this all come about?
You want me to start?
Sure.
Yeah, you go ahead and start.
Okay.
Maybe I'll get a word in edgewise.
Originally, it was going to be for Alter Ego magazine. I'm associate editor of the magazine, and I write articles, and I do interviews for them for almost 10 years now, and that's what it started out to be. And what happened was, because I tend to do long interviews, I try to get as much as I can when I interview anybody, whether they're a superstar or whether they're a complete unknown or a virtual unknown. And the more I talked to Sal, the longer it went. And then we talked about, making it a book, Eric and I. And then we were originally at some point going to excerpt, a small portion of it in Alter Ego, almost like as a teaser for the book. And then Roy decided, no, why don't you guys go ahead and save everything for the book? Because Roy, and I think we need to give Roy credit, generously, gave up a chance to have a Sal Buscema issue of Alter Ego, so we could do a book on Sal, because he recognized that Sal deserved one too. And we owe Roy a thank you for that, because he was exceptionally good about it. Some people might not have been, but then again, Roy's always been easy to work with. But essentially, that's how it came about. And once we realized that, okay, we don't have Alter Ego to worry about, then we made it as long as it needed to be. And I think total on tape, I have 10 hours of Sal and me talking on tape. And, of course, a few things are added in private conversations. But essentially, that's how the book became a book.
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much it. Jim and I have been talking about doing something together for a couple of years before that. We'd even pitched a couple of things, which hopefully we'll get to do at some point if the economy picks back up. But so this came along, and we thought it was a great opportunity to finally get to do something together.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric and I have known each other for how many years now?
Since 2000. Actually, Jim was one of the first professional artists I'd ever kind of became friends with, and it was through. I had just started at Twomorrows in May of 2000, and then in June of 2000, I did the Heroes Con for Twomorrows. My wife and I stopped the booth, and Jim came up really mad at someone because of an interview that guy was having coughing problems with, and so that's how we got to know each other.
You brought the tape recorder.
Yeah, exactly. Borrowed my tape recorder.
Right, I was doing an interview, and someone decided to stick his nose in it and try to essentially find a way to make it his interview, and because he wasn't getting anything out of it, he decided there wasn't going to be one with this artist he was representing, and I put a stop to that by threatening to punch his lights out. But we got our way, and that's how Eric and I met, and essentially Eric and I have been good friends virtually from the moment we met each other.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we talk on the phone all the time, so it was just a matter of time before we finally got to work on something together.
Yeah, that's right. We've got other things that we're hoping we can't really announce yet, but we've got other things that we want to do. So we're just glad to be doing something together for a change. Hey, I was the first person to draw on your sketchbook, wasn't I? Your Plastic Man sketchbook.
Yeah, my Plastic Man sketchbook. Yeah, the first one.
Yeah, that was neat.
Now, Eric, you recently were posting some responses on our forum in regards to some people's requests for specific Modern Masters issues, books. So you want to elaborate for the audience here how you go about kind of making those selections and bouncing around between the decades and of the artists that you're picking from?
Well, I wish I could say it was a scientific process, but it's really not. A lot of it's just who I happen to run into at a con, or just someone might make a suggestion, saying, "You know what? That's a good idea. I'll bump them up the list." I try to go back and forth where I'm not doing similar artists back to back to back. I try to mix it up where I've got someone who broke in the 70s, and then maybe someone who broke into the 80s or 90s, and then jump around. So you have a different flavor each volume, and there's no real pattern to it. Occasionally doing that. I mean, like when I did the Micro Ringo book, people were like, "Has he really been around long enough?" I mean, and I'm so glad I did that one because he passed away the next year, and if I was friends with Mike, and he lived 20 minutes down the road from me, and he had been hemming and hawing on it, but probably when I got Todd DeZago on board, and that got him kind of spurred, and we got it done. I'm so glad we did. And Todd's done a couple more books for me with me since then. We just did the Chris Sprouse book that just came out a couple months ago. He did the interview for that. So, and that that's kind of good too. It's just I've made so many friends doing these books too. Like Todd and Roger Ash, and so. Like I said, it's not a scientific process, but I've got just a big list, and I just kind of see who's different this time, who I run into, and who I get a number for.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the fun about the comics business in general, right? Is you go to these cons and you end up sitting next to somebody at dinner that you just kind of got swept away with, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is a great person, and then next thing you know, we're interviewing them, or you're doing a book with them, or whatever. I mean, that's kind of cool thing about this industry that is probably a little different than some other industries.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a really insular industry, and everybody knows everybody. It's about, if you go down a couple, it's that little. It's not even a 6 degrees of separation for cons. It might be a 3 degree separation.
Yeah.
So everybody knows everybody for the most part, and that's what makes it fun. I mean, I have guys come up to me and tell me, like Brian Bendis. I just saw it. He just came up to a show. It was like, "Oh, I love your books," blah blah blah. And it's like we started talking like we've known each other for a year or so, and I've never spoken to him before that. So it's that kind of. And you guys know that's from your message boards and everything. It's so easy to form bonds with people with like interests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, not only that. In the case of the work I do, in the case that Eric does, we've now got quite a body of it that. And because Eric does things mainly in the interview format, as do I, people see some of our words too, and they certainly see some of our interests and some of our thoughts. And some people, I think, and I've heard this, I'm sure Eric has too, some people feel like when they meet us, they already know us. And it's a great icebreaker, and I think it helps form the kind of bond that Eric was talking about. I think because they already know something about us before they approach us, and that's a big thing, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Now, Jim, for the benefit of our audience, you want to tell a little bit about your backstory with comics?
Well, let's see. I got interested in drawing because I saw George Reeves flying through the air, busting through walls, and he's getting the hugs from Lois Lane. And I said, that's a good job. I kind of like to do that. Well, I couldn't. I tried, but can't jump off a porch and go far. And then between that and Adam West being Batman, I became interested in drawing comic books. all through my life. Well, not just drawing. I wanted to write them too, although that hasn't happened, but through one quirk or another. But I ran a comic book shop for almost 9 years. I put on like 7 comic book conventions, or is it 9? 9. And I forget, I lose track. And I got to know a lot of people in the business for that. But I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in fine art, and I was doing fine art. And a lot of people leave comics and do fine art. That's the way it used to be back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I actually went the opposite way. And I did not get a master's degree, frankly, to run a comic book shop. As much as I enjoyed the people and enjoyed comics, I wanted to do it. So what I did in my case was when I got married, put my wife through college. When she graduated, she got a job, and I quit the comic shop the very next week. And I had already been sending out portfolios, and I'm like, I'm out of a job. I come home, from talking with the owner, and I left amicably. It wasn't hard feelings. And I'm opening my door, and the phone is ringing, and it was Millennium Comics with a job, and that's how long I was out of work. Unbelievable, that's how I started.
Cool. Now, guys, well, for both of you, what do you have coming up for us? Anything you can talk about as far as books or magazines or anything good like that?
Well, right now, I think we're still in the stage of trying to figure out which project, because Eric and I have discussed, at least half a dozen. It's a matter of which one we can get to work on next. And I don't want to say, in part because I don't want to steal an idea, but also because we're still trying to figure out exactly which direction and which book will be the next. We have a pretty good idea. We're just not ready to say yet, and I'm still working.
Well, I think the next one's already been announced, so I think we can talk about that. I think it was.
Well, has it been announced? I didn't think it had.
John mentioned it at San Diego. I don't know if anybody heard because they go through the panels. But, so I think we could say that we're doing a book on Carmine Infantino for next year.
Cool.
Oh, yes.
And I should say not a book, but the book. I would say.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, you go ahead. I mean,
right.
Jim did. How many hours of interview did you do with Carmine?
Lord have mercy. I would imagine at least 15 to 20 hours on tape. And if I start talking about all the private conversations that we had, things that he wasn't clear about, and then we'd go over, and then he'd think of something to add, and I'd think of something to ask him that I didn't have on tape before. The interview itself was done over a period of time. In fact, it's an interesting evolution. Originally, I called up Carmine one day just to do a very short interview for Alter Ego about when Carmine worked for the Bernard Bailey shop in the 1940s during the Second World War. And I thought that, it'd be neat to have a short article about that shop and what Carmine remembered. So we did that. It was only like maybe about 20, 30 minutes of talking. And one day I'm talking on the phone with him, and we started talking about art, his approach to drawing, and I'm thinking, this information is too good not to tape. So I said, Carmine, we got to tape this. And he says, well, what are you going to do with it? I said, I don't know, but we ought to have it on tape. So I said, do you want to have the conversation over? And he said, sure. So I put a tape in, and we started talking about art and drawing, and it was, Carmine, doesn't usually talk about it to the extent that we did. And then every so often, Carmine would think of something that he thought ought to be saved for posterity, and he'd call me up, and he'd say, turn the tape machine on. Or sometimes I would think of something, and I'd say, Carmine, do you feel I got a couple questions? Do you mind, if I put a tape in? And we were in all directions for the first few hours of what is on tape, which drove Brian Morris, our transcriber, probably some fits trying to figure out where are they going. But eventually, I didn't have an idea to put this as a book originally. It was going to be for Alter Ego, and then the problem got to be it was so long, it was impossible to put it in Alter Ego. Even if what we had is more than even 2 issues long. And so what are we going to do? Well, almost like Sal Buscema, got to do a book. Well, that necessitated then going back and doing Carmine's life and career in some kind of order. And with me trying to remember bits and pieces of conversations that I had on tape for like 2 or 3 years running. But then that's what we had to do, and that was how we put it together, and that's essentially how it became a book. And in fact, that was actually the first project I believe that Eric and I ever discussed. Am I right about that?
I think it might be, yeah.
Yeah,
because that was been kind of in the planning stages for over a year.
Yeah, that's right. And so Roy Thomas and I did the John Romita book, John Romita and all that jazz, and Roy, because of Roy's schedule and everything like that, Roy didn't really want to do another book. So, and I didn't really want to do it by myself, and it was only natural I go to Eric because he's good at layout. Eric is good at editing, and Eric knows how to do the things that, frankly, I can't do. And he knows how to put a good book together. I mean, look how successful Modern Masters is. I don't have to tell anybody that. And because we've had a long friendship, I mean, frankly, there's no better person for me to do books with. So that's sort of how all this has kind of come about.
Yeah. Hey. And then on the Modern Masters front, the Buckingham volume, which was due out months ago, will be resolicited soon. And we had to cancel the orders and resolicit. Just some Bucky was moving, and then the shows came and Fables got in the way and all kinds of things. So, but that's back on schedule, and then there'll be a Darwin cookbook, and I'm just about done with Guy Davis as well. So
I can't wait for that.
The next 3 volumes, yeah.
I also should have said that, again, Roy was good about giving his blessing again about doing Carmine as a book, even though it meant it wouldn't be an alter ego. That's another thing that Roy gave up for us. So, I mean, we really should thank Roy, for that. And I want people to know that, because I think it's a good clue to Roy's character that he's a very giving person in that way. He could have said, no, I want an alter ego because that's what it was supposed to be done for. And if he'd have said that naturally, I would have done what Roy wanted. But Roy gave a blessing, for us to do it. And I feel like it's very important to mention that.
Hey, for the Sal Buscema book, I see there's actually 2 different hardcover editions. Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, we've got a very limited hardcover edition that has sketches in it. Sal's doing, I think it's 52 sketches is what we normally do. It's like A through Z plus AA through ZZ. Yeah, that's how we've done the sketch edition. We did one of that for the Joe Sinnott book, and maybe for another 1 or 2 books we've done like that. But so we've got that, and once he's got all the sketches, we'll kind of post on the website the number of each head, and it's kind of going to be first come, first served. It's only going to be available through the website, that version. So there will be, and it's like I think a 3x5 head sketch kind of thing. So, and as you probably, I don't know if you've asked him about this during your previous interview, since I wasn't part of it, but Sal doesn't do a lot of shows, so it's hard, unless you get a direct commission from him, it's hard to get a sketch from Sal. So I think it's a good opportunity for those people who like to have a little bit of original Sal art.
I agree. And by the way, Carmine has also done the same for the Infantino book. Yes.
Cool.
And they, for the most part, they're doing the characters they're best known for, and the ones of course, the one they like. But generally, with a lot of artists, the characters are best known for are the ones they like for the most part too. If you look, by the way, we'll talk about the cover for the Sal Buscema book. Eric and I are going, well, we were kicking the cover idea around, and we decided it was going to be either like the Hulk and the Abomination, and or Spider-Man and Green Goblin. And I was saying to Eric, well, he's going to go for the Hulk because he loves the Hulk, and I always liked the idea of the Hulk fighting in the desert because the way Sal drew deserts, and that landscape. And so I called up Sal, and I said, Sal, we're talking about a cover, and these are the 2 ideas we have. And Sal says, I want to do the Hulk, which I knew he would, and that was. And I said, this is Hulk and Abomination fighting in the desert, and that's all I said to Sal. And he did a tremendous cover. Which I knew he would. We all knew he would, of course, or he wouldn't be doing a book on him. But more importantly, it's a beautiful cover, and I think it shows Sal after all these years still showing that he has all of his abilities at command. He hasn't lost anything, and it's very dynamic and eye-catchy.
Yeah.
And also, I guess you want to mention that the hardcover is slightly a few more pages than the paperback. It's got a color section. One of the things in that color section, Sal has done. Well, he used to do. He does life drawings every not every week, but for a long period of time. Most Fridays, he'll go to a little life drawing class at a local university. Where there's one of those classes where you pay $10 and you get to draw the model. So we've got a lot of his life drawings in the book. So there'll be some stuff that you've never seen from Sal, and also for the color section, he's got an oil painting he's done. So you get to see another side of Sal, some of his more of his fine art side.
Right. That's one of the things I really wanted to do with both Carmine and with Sal, is to show that these guys weren't just hacks that sat in a room and just turned out pages like they were, automatons. That these are human beings that made these pages. There was human beings that felt the stories that they were telling, and that's something that sometimes we forget about, and that's one of the reasons why I think that these books are important, and particularly with Carmine. Carmine's given a lot of interviews, but nothing like what I've got. And I will say, and I hope this doesn't sound too immodest, I think it is the best Carmine interview anyone has done. It certainly has taken a long time to do it. A lot of time was spent on it, absolutely more than I spent on any interview out of all the interviews I have done, because we want to do something special for Carmine, because Carmine really matters in the history of comics. I think that people will learn a lot about Carmine as a person and as an artist. And, of course, let's not forget he was a president and publisher of DC Comics for many years, through what a lot of people who lived through that era, me included, think is one of their best periods, certainly a very fertile period at times. And that's the important things about these books. When you're doing biography like Eric and I are doing, we want people to be able to identify with these people even beyond the work whenever possible, because this gives you a human connection that you can't get just on a printed page, and that's sort of our mindset in a way.
Very good. Well, I certainly have a lot of respect for you guys after my short-lived career as a editor and publisher, so I can't freaking imagine the work that goes. Like Eric, a new book seems like every time I turn around there's another volume. I don't know how you keep it all straight, and Alter Ego coming out every month, and oh my God, it's madness. I tell you, madness.
It's an interesting thing about Eric and I. We're different in some ways, and we're like in a great many ways. One of the really good things I think the two of us have going is I have always, mainly through Alter Ego, which covers the 30s to the mid-70s, I've always tended to cover the Golden Age and the Silver Age artists, and in as much depth as I can. Eric has, through Modern Masters, has concentrated more on the newer people, and so I think we have both done our own bit for comics history as best we can, and we do it in different ways in different subjects, and we cover, and between the two of us, we cover an awful lot of ground, and I think that I'm going to give you a plug here, Eric. I think the Modern Masters books are exceptionally important because most everybody, I think probably everybody you have covered is still actively working, with exception of like Maringo, who's unfortunately gone now. Very good man, very good person. And I think that it's good to have these books come out while these people are alive to get the plaudits that they deserve. And I think that's partly why we do it, because, Alter Ego's a fancy. It only makes so much money, but the joy of being able to interviews someone like Lou Cameron, who had a brief comic book career through most of the 1950s. He actually wrote over 300 to 400 paperbacks, by the way, under his name and other names. And to be able to say, hey, Lou Cameron existed. Here is what he did. This is why he matters. And what we do, frankly, is beyond the money that we get, but it is a labor of love, even beyond whatever money that we make, and we do it because we understand that these people are important and they matter, whether they're big names or small names. And it brings me, I know Eric feels this way, it brings us a lot of satisfaction that, beyond anything financial that we get, although the money doesn't hurt.
Yeah, what Jim said.
Great.
I was long-winded as usual.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, and thank you for helping us talk to Sal. It was a great opportunity, and we really appreciate it.
Yep.
Oh, no problem. I know, like I said, I know you guys have been wanting to talk to Sal for a while, so I'm glad I could be a part of helping you get that interview. So.
Yeah, we both appreciate it, and Sal deserves it, and I'm just glad that people appreciate Sal, and I think they'll appreciate him, maybe just a slight bit more. We add a tiny bit to the appreciation through our book. Then our job is really done. But of course, Sal's career, is just an immense body of work that I think generations have a good reason to always remember, and we just wanted to add a little something extra. But Sal did all the work himself. He certainly didn't need us. But you know what I mean. It's just something that's important to us, and the fact that fans do care about these creators as human beings is an important thing, and that's the thing I like to keep stressing, because that's one of the things that we feel make us, our work, special beyond some people just doing something for a few pages and giving you a dry read. We try to do something that will matter to the readers.
Great. Well, thanks, guys, and have a wonderful evening.
You too,
guys.
And good luck with all your future publications.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was a really cool interview.
Sure was.
Yeah. He was lively. He was very talkative. It was very cool.
Yeah. I love talking to these classic creators. They have so much insight that all the new crop doesn't have, because things were so much different and they've seen everything change. It's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't BSing. I mean, he and his artwork are like, pardon me, the 70s for Marvel. Between he and his brother, I just remember that was the style. That was when I pick up a Hulk book in that period, it's just like I knew exactly what I was getting. I was getting good artwork, and I was getting that style. So this was quite an honor for me to talk to him. That was very cool. No, we got to pretend we didn't say that stuff in the beginning.
What are you pretending, Jamie?
So we got to pretend we didn't say that stuff in the beginning, because this is supposed to be as we go out.
We're already recording.
So we're going to pretend that we didn't.
We're pulling back the veil here.
Oh, man. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
No, see, the secret is we do these big interviews. You don't want to lose anything, and you don't want to be rude to them, so you don't make them wait and sit through your intro, and you save it the second you're done recording it so that you don't lose it.
Yeah, that's
so. That's the secret, right?
Yes.
I didn't realize we were recording.
Obviously.
Glad I didn't say what I really thought about Peter in there. Go ahead. What are we doing?
Everybody knows what you think about Peter. Man, geez. Crazy Dutchman.
Exactly.
I'm gonna call him the Flying Dutchman from now on.
I hate the Dutch.
Anyway, that was a wonderful, wonderful discussion.
Yeah, it was.
Very, very honored to have him on the show.
They say he doesn't go to a lot of shows, but I really, 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 really now hope I can get to a show where I get a chance to shake his hand and meet him.
Yeah, I think he's based out of Virginia.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be too far-fetched for him to go to maybe like a Heroes Con.
Well, he's gone to Pittsburgh a couple times.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that, because I've been to Pittsburgh like 11 years.
So I'm really hoping maybe this April that he'll make it up to
you always
Pittsburgh.
got that. Put the request in now.
All right. Well, that was a good, healthy episode. I don't think we need to really say much here.
Nope.
So this episode was sponsored by Twomorrows. Twomorrows.com. They're having their big 30% off companion sale. So go buy a few books. Get the podcast companion while you're at it. Maybe you care. You listen to a podcast. Chances are high. It might be interesting to you. And while you're there, put in a pre-order for the Fast and Furious Art of Sal Buscema and glory over his life and some beautiful artwork. How can you be disappointed in that? And get maybe one of those exclusive hardcovers and get some sketches and stuff, right? That's pretty awesome.
Only $100 for the ultra limited hardcover. And how many issues did they make of it?
52.
That's really, that's not so bad, because the hardcover alone is what, like $30 or something like that.
No, the hardcover is $46.95.
So basically, you're paying $53 or whatever for an original Sal Buscema sketch.
And I'm sure it's signed too. I mean, you're getting an autograph and a sketch, so $50 isn't that bad, really.
That's
when
pretty
you
reasonable.
put it all together.
Yeah. So go for it. Twomorrows.com. And again, a big thanks to them for helping us set up this interview. If you'd like to send us some feedback, our email address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. Visit our website at comicgeekspeak.com, where we have all the other interviews we've ever done, which is a lot, including, as mentioned in this episode, Gene Colan. We've also done Joe Kubert and so many others. So check that out. Follow us on Twitter. We're Comic Geek Speak. Leave us a voicemail. The number is 215-279-8839. And you want to be part of the great community of comic fans, go to thecomicforums.com. I want to thank everyone who has donated to the show. We really appreciate it. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.